Hello everybody and welcome back to another Kings of War Battle Report. I'm Visibly Riley, and today we have Empire of Dust versus Forces of Nature. As is common on this channel, this battle is fought at 2250 points and the scenario was push. First we see my opponent's list. So starting off, he has 2 regiments of Naiad Heart Piercers, followed by 2 hordes of Elementals, 1 Earth with Brew of Strength and 1 being Fire, then 2 regiments of Forest Shamblers, a Druid with Surge 7 and Aura of Heroism 3, then a Tree Herder, followed by 2 Unicorns, both of whom have Lightning Bolt 5, and one has Murden's Amulet of the Fireheart. Then finally we've got 2 Beasts of Nature, both of whom have Lightning Bolt 6, Fly, Vicious, and 7 attacks. I'm a fan of this list. I think my opponent did a pretty good job with it. It's actually a slight change from the list he brought to Clash of Storms, which was also a Force of Nature list, where he used to have Lycans and a Centaur Chief, I believe, instead of the Earth Elementals and the Heart Piercers. And he also got, I think, Surge onto the Druid. I like the list, as I said before. I think that it's obviously a very elite army, but it has this elemental core that it can march up the center of the board. It's pretty hard to actually kill off elementals, especially given that he has Aura of Heroism here, which is just great with the army. And then on top of this, he has 4 flying monsters, all of whom have Lightning Bolt, a decent amount of Lightning Bolt at that, and he has some heal just to top it off. And then the Heart Piercers are... I definitely talked with my opponent after this game and before it, and he wasn't sure whether he wanted to have the Heart Piercers as sort of a unit he's trying out. But I actually really like him in the list because as regiments, they're 13-15. They've got regen 4+. He's got tons of heal, and the Aura of Heroism can really knock up that nerve of theirs to a point where it's a problem. And then since his list is so small, and before it was even smaller, he doesn't have a whole lot of ways to just sort of leave a unit back on an objective without wasting a lot of combat potential. These elementals really need to get up the table. And so, yeah, I think the Heart Piercers do a great job of being that mid-range slash backfield unit for him. So, enough about my opponent. Moving on to my army, this is a slightly different Empire of Dust list from the one I played earlier this week. But we start off with 2 hordes of skeleton warriors, one of whom has the Banner of the Griffin, always a great start. Then we've got a troop of revenants with 2 hand weapons instead of shields, so they're defense 4+, but they've got crushing 1. Then a horde of revenant chariots, 2 bone giants, 2 bone dragons, a cursed high priest with heal 4 and Murden's Amulet of the Fireheart, an idol of Shobik, Mortibris, and skeleton regiment. I'm not sure what this is called in Edge of the Abyss. I've heard that it has an actual name, but in Easy Army it's called Skeleton Regiment, which I'm a big fan of. I think that's really funny. So yeah, this is a slightly different army. I swapped out 2 regiments of revenants that I had before and the casket I had on my chariots, and instead took the Fireheart Amulet on my Cursed High Priest, which I think is a little bit better than the casket. They're both sometimes, they're variable. They're not going to be great in every game, but I think the amulet is a little bit better than a casket on the chariots. And then I took out the revenants and replaced them with the skeleton regiment, the named Edge of the Abyss unit, and a troop of revenants, just because I really like troops of revenants. I think they're solid. If this were undead, of course, the revenant knights are significantly better. They're amazing, but Empire Dust doesn't have access to them. So instead, troops of revenants, they're relatively cheap. They've still got 10 attacks, they're still melee 4, and they make a great backfield unit considering the amount of surge that I have. I don't have too much surge. I mean, I only have 2 casters in this army, but still being able to surge something into a backfield flyer is still great. And lastly, the skeleton regiment. This is a very high variance unit. It has range 5+, but melee 4+, and then it has blast D3, throwing weapons, piercing 2, and crushing 2. So this is a great double tap unit if you can get that off. So it'll roll up to you, throw some bombs at you, I guess, with piercing 2 and blast D3, and then charge you with those 8 attacks, which might be able to get a flank to get the 16, but it really is down to what that blast turns into. Like, this can decimate units, but mostly it's, I don't know, it's a fun unit. so I brought it. Here is the table. I'll take a quick second to talk about the terrain. So starting on my side, which is the closest to the camera here, from left to right, we've got a pond, which the entire thing is a height flat piece of terrain, difficult terrain, and then it's bordered by a height 1 obstacle. Then we have that little stone on a base. I think that's 50 mil base. No, it's probably actually big. It looks like a 60 mil square. So we have that there. The whole thing is a height 4 obstruction. Then we have a hill in front of my forces, then a height 2 hill in front of my forces, followed by a height 6 forest. Then from left to right on my opponent's side, we have a height 2 hill, a height 6 forest that he is in, then a height flat water feature, and then again another height 1 obstacle that's connected to a height 2 hill. And I think the table layout here, it's not too unbalanced one way or the other, especially with an army like Forces of Nature that can get out of hand pretty quickly due to the high amount of Pathfinder and the high flight, or the high amount of speed that they have as an army. So this table's more middle of the road, which I'm obviously a fan of because I would not benefit from too much terrain or a complete lack of it. I think I want just about this amount. So as for the mission, so push has 1 loot counter in the center of the table, and then you roll D3 per opponent after deployment. So the loot counters, as a small refresher, you can only move 5 inches. Your speed is reduced. You cannot fly. You cannot shamble, or you can't surge, and then you cannot be hit by wind blast. Doesn't do anything to you. So you can drop them at the beginning of your turn, anywhere in base space contact with you. And then you pick up a loot counter that's on the ground if you end your turn upon it. So with that said, I put 2 counters back on one of my skeleton hordes, while my opponent put 2 of his on the earth elementals, and I'll get through that in a second here. And the idea is that we're trying to get across the table with these counters. We can pick up the one in the middle, we can pick up the ones that we can combat, or if a unit drops it for whatever reason. Individuals can't pick it up, nor can war machines, although neither of us have war machines, although they can contest them. So yeah, that's about it. Oh, and then we get the victory points, of course. So you get 1 victory point per loot counter that you have that's up completely on your side of the table, and you get 2 victory points per loot counter that's completely on your opponent's side of the table. So that's the idea here. We're just trying to get across that center line. And starting with my deployment from left to right, very compact deployment here. We've got that green alligator/crocodile model up there. That is my Idol of Shobek for the time being. To his right is my first giant. Behind them is the first bone dragon. To the left there is the skeleton regiment, the guys with thrown weapons. Behind them is my troop of revenants with the 2 hand weapons. And then in front, I've got my first skeleton horde. They have nothing. Behind them is the second skeleton horde. That's the one with the banner of the griffin and the 2 loot tokens. Sandwiched between them is my high priest and mortiferous, giving that stealth bubble within 6 and making sure that my casters can be wherever they want. To the right of that, we've got the second bone giant and the second bone dragon behind him. And then lastly, we've got my chariot horde. So coming from a Ratkin list where I've got 20 drops and 30 something, it's just a ridiculous number of unit strength. This is very compact, very big change, but it's I like it. I like more compact lists, honestly. I'd like a bit more speed, but I think this is a solid deployment. So on my opponent's side, from left to right again, we start with an empty base. So that's actually the empty bases are my opponent's Heartpiercer regiment. He just bought some Mirsha. They're like Celtic archers. They look really cool, but they haven't arrived yet. So right now he just has the empty bases. So starting with empty base 1, that's the Heartpiercer regiment. To the right of that, we've got the first unicorn, and behind them the first beast of nature. To the right of that, we have the first forest shambler unit. To the right of that, we have the tree herder, and behind them is the second beast of nature. To the right of that, we've got the earth elementals. Those are those walrus guys. Again, great Mirsha models. Behind them is his druid. Then to the right of that, we've got the second unit of forest shamblers, and then to the right, a second unit of heartpiercers in the little piece of pond there. And behind them, the second unicorn, and finally, we've got the fire elementals. I think my opponent did a great job deploying here. We're both, sort of obviously eyeing this gap between the rock and my forest. so he can roll up, although he has a lot of Pathfinder and can always redeploy. And if his tree herder looks like it's a little too far forward, that's actually because I took this picture after Vanguard, because I forgot. So yeah, he's Vanguarded the tree herder forward a little bit, but nothing else. And we move forward. So turn one. Turn one, I win the roll, and the skeletons just sort of march forward. Everything that was speed 5 went 5 forward, while the monsters went a mix of, I have a giant that's actually a little off. He couldn't be put down as he's a little too heavy. So in front of the chariots, there's an empty 50 mil base. That is my stone giant over there, or my bone giant. So he's on the right. Otherwise, all my other monsters just sort of went some variance of their speed. I held Shobik back a little bit so he couldn't get charged by Forest Shamblers, although I doubt that was going to happen with the Surge 7. And yeah, I didn't move the chariots. Instead, I did the Surge trick where I just sat still, I gave them a halt order, and then I just surged them into my giant so they could shoot. And then they take some shots, I believe, at the Shamblers right in front of them, and that's that wound dial that he has. I only do 1 wound, but skeleton archers versus a bunch of Death 5. Yeah. And here is the Forces of Nature turn. So yeah, you can see if we roll a picture back and then we go forward again, he's just sort of shambled around as well and moved some of his units. That blank black base on the left that is in front of one of his unicorn models and by his Shamblers, that's actually one of his unicorns. It just, he puts down proxy bases whenever these wings get in the way. So yeah, he has one right there. Then he has, he moved his Heart Piercers forward a little bit to get some shots, just to get him barely in range. And yeah, otherwise everything's just getting ready to lightning bolt the crap out of my giant. So you can see those dice right there. He ends up doing 11 wounds with his, he has 22 lightning bolts here and 1 unit of Heart Piercers to shoot at me. Does 11 wounds, and then also shoots at Shobik. So 11 there, and 1 wound to Shobik from these guys. And if we roll one back, yeah, so right now my giant is sitting on a dash 20 due to the Banner of the Griffin, rerollable. So he needs a 9 rerollable, and he rolls it. He gets an exact 9 each time, so very unfortunate losing a giant turn 1, but we'll see how that goes. Turn 2. So a mistake I made last turn, obviously, was getting my giant killed. I didn't need to go that far forward, and I probably could have managed my Mortibris bubble a little bit better to make sure that I had stealth on all of them, but I'm still getting used to using Mortibris. And Mortibris and the Shobik together are great due to Shobik's bubble of giving everyone Iron Resolve within 6. So natural combination. So yeah, I just move my units steadily forward. They go about 5 each. I think my chariots slide a little to the left. And I move my other dragon that was on the right behind the now dead bone giant all the way to the left, just get all my monsters in one pile due to the high mobility of the dragons and the fact that I have Surge. So I'm not really worried about, over-representing over here, especially since we're playing push, he has to come to me eventually. Like, I already have these 2 tokens, and I'm likely going to get to the center before him. So yeah, I end up putting 1 dragon in base-to-base contact with the rock piece of terrain, and the idea here was that I would get cover against any of his lightning bolts and or heart piercers, but I am in charge range of his forest shamblers, which is something that I don't love, but it's okay. And I forgot to mention that red D10 that's right next to his walrus models in the center of the screen right now, that'll be marking his Aura of Heroism. So right now he's got 1 pip of rally on the Earth Elementals. So yeah, with my shooting, I think I do 1 more wound to the Fire Elementals with my archers, something like that. And lastly, I cast Surge onto the back Bone Dragon to move him the 1 inch forward to get into base space with my Bone Giant. Probably not the best idea. It's really hard to get line of sight with this many monsters, and I probably should have just held him an inch back, but I wasn't really thinking. And oh yeah, so sorry, let's roll one back. This is Forces of Nature turn 2. So my opponent here has moved, just a little bit forward again, and but on the left, he's decided to take the Forest Shambler charge into my Bone Dragon, and I think that this was a smart call. He wasn't really going to get much work done with his shooting, and if he doesn't charge there, then my Bone Dragons can just sort of fly around and do whatever they want. really restricting his ability to move due to Shamble. But by taking this charge, he's opened me up to actually be able to get some points here, as I think he's just being a little too pensive. Maybe not too pensive, but he has to hold back a little bit due to how Surge is crazy. So yeah, he takes that charge over there. And here, with all of his lightning bolts and all of his men, he does 9 wounds to my front skeleton regiment, but they're currently a -24, so there's no roll. And over here, it charges in and boop, puts 3 wounds on the dragon, which again is no roll because currently it's a -18. But Force Shambler is actually pretty good against bone dragons due to their low defense, which a lot of people see a flying monster and assume it's at least defense 5, but bone dragons are only defense 4, so even 1 pip of crushing is pretty bad for them. Turn 3. So turn 3 starts off with some charges. I take the skeleton regiment, which is now a ghost tray, because they all kind of fell off while I was moving up. But they charge into the Force Shamblers along with the bone dragon that is now grounded. And otherwise, I just sort of I move Shobik around to the right so he can get around that rock. That square base is kind of really screwing me up as I don't have Nimble to get around it. And I move my front skeleton regiment. It's in charge range or to get charged, pretty much everything in his army except for the Earth Elementals and the Naiads. But I do move on to the loot counter in a vain attempt to grab that. My skeleton chariots just sort of, again, move to the left a little bit. They just shimmy down. And I move around my wizards to get some better line of sight and Inspiring Bubble. Now, here's the thing. I think Shobik should probably be on the right now. I probably should have rotated him right when I rotated that bone dragon over. Just because I could get the inspiring on these chariots, and it's going to be increasingly harder to have them inspired due to their positioning. So anyway, with just showing off that charge, and with shooting, I healed this skeleton unit for 6 wounds. They healed 1 wound due to the Iron Resolve, so they were down to 8 at the beginning of my turn. And over here in the combat, it's pretty funny. The Bone Dragon gets in here and hits with 5 of his attacks and rolls 4 ones. So he only does 1 wound by himself. I did get a heal off on him, a heal 4, so I healed, I think, 2 of the wounds, so now he's back at full health because he has Life Leech 1. And the Skeleton Regiment, unfortunately, is hindered when they charge in here, so they hit with 3 attacks, though, on 5 pluses, but I roll 3 ones again, and so they only get 3 wounds as they, blast D3, so they end up wounding with all of them, at least. And 4 is not enough. I need a 10. Don't get it. So here we see Force of Nature, turn 3. So my opponent here is trying to figure out, he knows he wants to charge those skeletons in the front that now only have 2 wounds, but with how much is really the question. And the answer is he sends in the Fire Elementals, 1 regiment of Shamblers, a Beast of Nature, and the Tree Herder, who is currently a little MIA just because his base wasn't working well with that giant eagle. So instead, eagle dude. So instead, it's just a 50 mil on the left. So it'll be right between that Birdman and the rock. So right in front of Shobik. Otherwise, everything just sort of moves around. Force of Nature is very mobile, so they just get to roll around the table where they want. And he moves forward with one of the Heart Piercers. The guy's on the right, because they currently had no shot, and he moves forward and just goes like, why not try to get some 6s onto my chariots, as he's also going to throw some Lightning Bolt there. So with his shooting, he ends up doing 9 wounds with Lightning Bolt. I'm inspired, so that's good, but I'm at dash 18, so he needs a 9, but he's done it earlier in the game, so a little wary about that. With the charge here, I forgot to mention the 4 Shamblers over here that I only did 4 wounds, charge into my Bone Dragon, because why would you charge the Skeleton Regiment, and do 4 wounds there. So, revenge. And at the end of this combat, he does 15 wounds to me, which is, I don't know, it seems low, but I haven't done the math just yet. Like the Fire Elementals, what do? They do like 7-ish wounds, and then the Shamblers do like 4-ish wounds, and then that's pretty low. But so he needs he's done 15 wounds to me. He needs a 9, again a 9, but doesn't get it on the reroll. So instead, my Skeleton Regiment stays. And here, the Chariots stayed. Good job, Chariots. Don't fail the 9 twice. And it looks like maybe okay, no, I didn't. So turn 4, thought I forgot to take a picture for a second there. So turn 4, I charge in with my chariots and the skeleton regiment that took 15 wounds last round into his fire elementals. I've actually forgotten to move the Iron Resolve token for those skeletons. I will remember later in the turn. My Bone Dragon that took 4 wounds from the 4 Shamblers charge in there because I can just slide the skeleton regiment, the guys with the range attacks, to the left and shoot it as naiads. So there's no, and I don't think I need the help to kill the 4 Shamblers right now. What are the odds that the dragon would screw up in 2 turns in a row? But and lastly, in the middle, I decide to do a little shuffle with my monsters. One of my Bone Dragon could, or my Bone Giant could charge the Tree Herder in the front, but so could Shobik, but they both can't fit there because my Skeleton Regiment in the front didn't die. So I have to make the decision, a real Sophie's choice about which one I want. But since Shobik can cast Heal 6, I decide that the Giant should be fine, especially as one of my Bone Dragons now has flown over this combat, and since the Tree Herder didn't get to reform, I can fly over there, and I'm placed, once you put down the token, my center point is in his rear, which means that when I cast Surge here, I will get a rear charge if it works, but I need a 2 as it's sort of at an oblique angle. So yeah, and I move my priests around. Mortibris is sitting behind the rock just to get out of the way and make sure his stealth bubble is up. And my other priest has moved behind the troop of revenants to make sure that I can cast a Surge 10 into my Bone Dragon. So yep, just showing off that I charged the fire elementals with these 2 units, and the Bone Dragon here, and this one, and boop. Yep. So my dragon actually succeeds at getting this charge off, getting this surge off, I should say, which is big news, as that's 36 attacks with Crush 3. But the Tree Herder is still defense 6, so I only win him on 3s, and he ended up getting the Aura of Heroism double pip last turn on the Earth Elemental. So this Tree Herder is rocking a nerve of 2022. So yeah, it's a tall order. But my Bone Dragon and Bone Giant are up to it and just destroy this thing. They must have been lumberjacks in their previous life, because the Bone Dragon, or the Bone Giant, rolls 6 for his variable attack, so he gets 12, and it's a slaughter. Like, I think I needed a 4, so I did like 18 wounds. It's pretty nuts. But over here, my Bone Dragon number 2, I think I had Mortibris cast heal on him, so he's healed up a few wounds there. And I also cast heal onto my Skeleton Regiment or Skeleton Horde with Shobik. And Shobik ended up healing 6 wounds off of him. So yeah, they're down to a mere 8 wounds. And with his Tree Herder gone, his Shamblers on the left gone, it looks like I have that left flank. I did get some shots again onto his Heart Piercers in the woods on the left, but I only end up doing 2 wounds, as they're in cover, so I only hit on 6s. But yeah, I only get 2 wounds through there. And in the combat versus the Fire Elementals, I do fairly well, but those Fire Elementals were also at dash 19, again with defense 5, and I didn't really have the chance to cast Bane Chant, as I didn't think it would do that big of it wouldn't be that big of a difference, so instead I just went with the heal on the Bone Dragon. And I think I made a big mistake here, which is why charge with the Chariots at all? Because if I hold the Chariots back, he could charge me with monsters, but he's not assured to kill those skeletons, as I could also spam heal onto them. Mortibris probably wouldn't heal the Bone Dragon on the left in that case. He would heal the Skeleton Horde in the front there, since Shobik landed all 6 of his heal first. So yeah, I'm not sure I should have charged with these Chariots. They're unlikely to break these Fire Elementals or even really give that much of a support, especially considering he has heal 14 right there. So I don't think that was a great move. But anyway, with my reforms, I reform the dragon in the center towards the Earth Elementals, and my Giant is just facing right down the line to bug everyone. And here we see Forces of Nature, turn 4. First off, you'll notice that his Beast of Nature, the one that was by my Bone Giant in the center frame, has flown over my lines and just pivoted twice to turn around, looking for those tasty rear charges. He also made sure when he placed this that Shobik couldn't get into a flank charge with Shamble, because again, Shobik doesn't have Nimble. So, yeah, pretty good positioning there. It looks like the unicorn on the far right is just sort of staring off into the void. That's just because his proxy base won't let him sit next to my opponent's Beast of Nature model. So instead, they both charged into my chariot sitting on 8 wounds, again, due to Life Leech, I healed 1. And that actually might have been an interesting idea with, maybe I should have gone for a heal on the chariots. Anyway, so the Fire Elementals and 4 Shamblers go back into the very wounded skeletons, who are now at 7 wounds. It looks like, yeah. No, how are they at 7? I must have knocked that. But anyway, so yeah, they're sitting at 7 wounds. And lastly, the Naiads that were in the trees, the ones that my skeleton regiment shot at, decide to go for this flank charge onto a Bone Dragon. And that's because he decided to try to surge the Earth Elementals into the flank as well. He could have charged it in the front, but this is a 2-inch surge, which, you know, those of you sitting there, you're like, oh, you've got 7 dice that you need 2 4+, whatever. But this is a great move. You really need to hedge your bets with something like Surge. I have failed 1-inch Surge before with 10 dice. It's just, it's not great. And I know that that's heuristic data, and we don't want to base everything on that, but it's anecdotal. But at the end of the day, you really want to hedge something like this, because if he doesn't roll those 2 4+ with those Earth Elementals, my Bone Dragon is free to basically do whatever the hell it wants, as it's not even locked down. I don't think the Heart Piercers can kill me, but they can definitely, or they can likely do at least 1 wound to me, which is what he needs to make sure I don't fly. So, yep, this is the end of combat. As you can see in the center, the Bone Dragon is gone. He actually did roll exactly 2 4+, if I remember correctly, so good hedge there. But the Earth Elementals in the flank just easily kill it. Since, you know, it's, what is that, 36 attacks on 4+ and then 2+? Yeah, not great. The Beast of Nature and Unicorn that charged into my chariots also evaporate them. And it's actually pretty good dice there. And I don't mean that, like, you know, he shouldn't, or on average he wouldn't drop me, but he rolls so well that it's sort of a foregone conclusion. But if we look here, yeah, just showing off the Earth Elementals, still have those 2 tokens in the back there. They just forgot to move with them. Right here, yeah, he ends up doing a further, what is that, a further 8 wounds to my skeleton horde in the front, and fails to break them. So, yep, skeleton's holding on for dear unlife. And turn 5. So, turn 5, my skeleton horde that would not die decide to do a combo charge along with the Bone Giant that was facing directly towards his Beast of Nature and Unicorn. Oh, I forgot to mention, when he did his reforms, if we roll some pictures back here, the Beast of Nature and Unicorn, who is actually where that black base is, not where he is on the right, are facing directly at my Giant, so we're just staring right down the line here. And over here, yep, so my Giant, that same Giant decides to go into the 4 Shamblers along with the Skeleton Regiment here, because they need to leave room for Shobik to get a charge into the Earth Elementals. Now, I don't think Shobik can kill Earth Elementals in one go, and that would be even, he did not cast Aura Heroism this turn because he needed to cast Surge. But I need to get some damage up, and Shobik is really hard to take out, so even if he charges me with Earth Elementals, I'm not worried about it. So, anyway, down at the bottom left, you can see my regiment, or my troop of Revenants are finally doing their job and have moved over to his Beast of Nature. He made it so Shobik couldn't charge him in the flank, but he didn't make it so this little troop couldn't. And they still have 10 attacks on a 4+ with Crush 1 native, so feel good about that. Lastly, I want to talk about the position, and I did charge with the Bone Dragon and Skeleton Regiment at the top there into the front of his Heart Piercers. I know it's hard to tell considering that there's literally 0 models there, but yeah, that's the front of them. He turned them around to make sure that my Bone Dragon couldn't fly. There was no way to move my Bone Dragon and land an inch or more away from his regiment of Heart Piercers and still get a flank charge onto those Earth Elementals, because taking a Shobik in the front and a Bone Dragon in the side, you know, that I could do. That I could see popping those Earth Elementals, and they still have the tokens, so that would have been very bad. So instead he decides to take one for the team there. But yeah, in the bottom there, I'm very happy with if you look at the center of the picture, it's a little hard due to, you know, how all these skeletons kind of look the same. But if you look at the two skeleton hordes, and then you look at Morgana is right there in that little gap where on the left where the two hordes are misaligned. And the idea is that Morgana is making it so that Beast of Nature and the Unicorn can't charge any of these, or you can't charge these, or any of the skeletons here, right? Because the skeleton horde in the front, even if they kill that little regiment of Force Shamblers, or they fail to kill them, they will roll back 1 inch. And when they do that, the Beast of Nature will be in the front, and so will the Unicorn. Then they're also in the front of the Banner of the Griffin unit in the back, but the only place they can land due to the unit in the front is where Morgana is sitting. Morgana is also facing towards them, so that wounded unit is the only place they'd have to land on top of that. So I'm just blocking all of his weird flight charges there. He could, of course, charge that High Priest sitting over there, but that's sort of a waste of a Beast of Nature, especially as the Unicorn. The Unicorn could charge a lot of flanks here, but that Unicorn is blocked by the line of sight of the Beast, so the Beast will have to charge first, and it can't be a combo charge. So that's the idea there. And here we're looking at the combats. Yep, we got that one. We got Shobik. We've got this into the little regiment. And yep, I get this surge into the flank. I really, really want this Beast of Nature to at least be wavered, because one of the things about my positioning here is that if he can charge that Banner of the Griffin unit in the butt, I'm not sure whether they will survive that, even at a dash 23. But I end up doing 9 wounds with these Revenants. I do cast Banechant from Morgana onto them, so yeah, they are crushing 2, so it's 4s and 3s. But yeah, I get 9 wounds here, and I rolled a 6 to get the waver, so that's great. Obviously, I'd prefer to get a kill, but waver is exactly what the doctor ordered. Over here, the Bone Dragon and the now mess of Skeleton Regiment walk right through those Naiads. I don't think the Skeleton Regiment even does that. They did not do that well this game. Their variance was a little off. But yeah, they're still getting work done. They're alive, sitting looking at the flank of those Earth Elementals. And yeah, so my Skeleton Regiment and Giant walk right through the Force Shamblers, and I think the Giant, again, he rolls a 1 this time for his variable attacks, but he still hits with 5 of them, like well above average, and does, along with the Skeletons, they do just enough wounds to turn that Brutal into a kill. And Shobik actually does very well against the Earth Elementals. Granted, he wounds them on 2s because he's crushing 4, but he does 7 wounds out of his 10 attacks. And then on his first roll, he rolls that 10, which was great. I was like, oh man, am I going to pop these guys in one go? But on the reroll, I roll a 9, and my opponent goes like, oh no, he's dead. And I'm like, well, Shobik doesn't have Brutal. He's not a Giant. So it's unfortunate, but great showing by Shobik. I ended up rolling forward with my Giant as far as he could, because I'm blocking the flank charge onto Shobik. I don't care whether he kills the Giant. I mean, I prefer him not to. But Shobik getting a flank charge is a big no-no, so I don't allow for that. And yeah, it's just showing that off. And here we see Forces of Nature turn 5. So, or this is this? No, this is the end of my turn, sorry. And here we see Forces of Nature turn 5. So the Earth Element, or the Fire Elementals, go into the unkillable Skeleton Horde, while the Beast of Nature that was on the left charges the flank of my Giant, my remaining Bone Giant. The Unicorn that he was blocking the line of sight to decides that the Fire Elementals can probably handle a severely wounded horde of skeletons on their own, and moves back to cast some Heal and or Lightning Bolt. At the bottom of the picture, his wavered Beast of Nature turns to face my troop of Revenants. And then lastly, I think the other Unicorn looks like it moved over to give some Inspiring. I'm not sure where the other Unicorn is right now. But yeah, he just moved around. And the Earth Elementals decided to charge into the front of the Giant just to make sure that the Beast wouldn't fail there, as it's actually not that likely that even in the flank the Beast can actually kill a Bone Giant, as again, it's a dash 20 right now with defense 5. So yep, showing up that charge, and this one, and pop. So charges into the Giant, does actually ridiculously well with the Beast. He might have been able to pop him on his own. So, but yeah, he pops the Bone Giant, that's not unexpected. And the Fire Elementals finally finish off these unkillable skeletons. which obviously were killable as 1, they're skeletons, and 2, they're gone. So yeah, pops right through them. And otherwise, I think my opponent just cast some heal onto the Earth Elementals to make sure that they weren't sitting on 7 wounds, and dropped the tokens that the Earth Elementals were holding and picked them up with his Beast of Nature instead. So, end of his turn looks like this. And yeah, I think he's also cast Aura of Heroism onto that Beast of Nature that's in the center of the screen, just to make sure that his Earth Elementals and Fire Elementals have some support. And turn 6. So, turn 6, I just start charging. So first off, we've got my little Revenant, my Troop Revenant, going into the front of that Beast of Nature, hoping to finish it off. I slide to the right a little bit, shimmy Cocoa Puff. My Skeleton Horde with the Banner of the Griffin, that's on that hill to the right, to force my leader point into the flank of those Fire Elementals, just in case I want to charge. And I charge into the flank of his Earth Elementals with only the Skeleton Regiment. I could get in there with the Bone Dragon as well, but the Bone Dragon has bigger fish to fry as he decides to fly over, and that little empty base right next to Shobik, that is the Bone Giant. He is going for a surge flank into the side of the Beast of Nature, while the Shobik himself has charged into the front of that Beast of Nature, as we determined he had line of sight just barely to the corner of the beast over the Earth Elementals. So yeah, just showing off this charge. Oh, his Heart Piercers, I think at some point shot at the Skeleton Regiment, did 2 wounds to him. And yeah, showing that charge, and bam! So I nailed the surge. It's only a 1-inch surge, but you know, I failed it before. So feeling good about that. And bam, hit this surge too. So this was a 3 or a 4-inch surge. So again, not the biggest numbers here. I prefer to not go for long surges. They're just not a great plan. But yeah, get it. And here's the end of combat. So my first little troop here ends up killing the Beast of Nature. I only do 1 wound to it. But with that 1 wound, I roll a 7. There's no inspiring around, and pop it. Here, yeah, Shobik and the Bone Dragon just whoop that beast. It's ridiculous. The Bone Dragon really getting lucky with its dice here and walking right through it. So that's great. And yep, the skeletons also just kill off the Fire Elementals. That's actually really unexpected, because I think they're only on like 1 or 2 wounds, and these guys just whoop them. And actually, lastly, before I mention the last combat, well, the last combat is that the Skeleton Regiment that charged into the flank of the Earth Elementals do what the Skeleton Regiment do, and fail. So they're piled in a corner in shame. But last turn, I forgot to mention that I had dropped the loot counter with the very, very wounded skeletons, and actually picked it up with the Banner of the Griffin. So I'm sitting on 3 tokens with my Banner of the Griffin unit, and 2 tokens with Shobik, who is not putting his rear to a unicorn and his flank to Earth Elementals, but my model wouldn't fit with that, so he's facing directly at the Earth Elementals right now. And here is my opponent's turn 6, so the Forces of Nature. The Earth Elementals decide to charge the front of Shobik and the flank of Shobik using the Unicorn, while the other Unicorn goes into Mortibriz, because why not? He doesn't have a whole lot else to do, why not go for it? Excuse me. So yep, just showing off that charge. And this one. And yeah, this, what's that? Okay, so end of combat. Yeah, he ends up doing 8 wounds to Shobik, but doesn't roll the, I think he's right now a -19. So doesn't roll the 11 that he needs to get rid of him. Or no, maybe he did 9, I think he did 9 wounds, that's after Iron Resolve. So he needed a 10 twice. Doesn't get it, but, you know, that's not too unexpected. And by the way, these unicorns wanted blood this entire game. Almost every lightning bolt wound was not the Beast of Nature, it's all unicorns. The other unicorn, though, was all sated. He was very tired, so he goes into Mortibriz, and not only does he miss all of his 4 attacks, he rolls 4 ones. So Mortibriz laughs in his face. You know, a dry, wry laugh. And we roll up. We actually do get a turn 7, but my opponent just concedes at this point, and you know, I get a lot of concessions on this channel, but this one was pretty earned, as I've got a flank charge onto 1 unicorn with a horde of skeletons and a bone dragon. I've got a flank charge and a front charge onto his Earth Elementals with Shobik and my skeleton regiment over there. I've got a charge onto his last unicorn with my Revenants. I could get a flank if I wanted. Mortibrus can do what he wants. He can cast Chant, he can Surge. So yeah, my opponent just decides to call it, as it was like 1 in the morning when we finished this game. So at the end of the game, we end up with I have 3 points on my side of the table, so that's 3 VP, and I have 2 on the Shobik, who is on my opponent's side of the table. So I have a 7-0 victory. And in terms of victory points, I mean, it's a forfeit, so I get a lot more, but even if we counted up what's on the table here, I have a ton of points. So a pretty solid victory for the Empire of Dust. And yeah, if you guys have any suggestions, feel free to leave them, and I'll catch you next time.